Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissack and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Well, hey, Dana, before we get started, we got some crazy times going on right now, but I'm super excited about our guest today. So we are real excited to have with us Mark Winters, who is the co-author of Rocket Fuel. And Mark, I'm sure you've done a ton of more amazing things besides the amazing book, Rocket Fuel. So why don't you kind of just fill our audience in a little bit about who you are and kind of what you've done?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Linda and Dana, for having me on here. I started off actually in big corporate. So I started with Procter & Gamble and kind of earned my stripes in that world, and then went to business school at the University of Chicago. And that's where I caught the entrepreneurial bug. I saw people that were entrepreneurs doing things that were way more interesting than I was doing at the time, and decided, hey, that sounds like the life for me. So sort of burned my ships and charged off in that direction. And then, fast forward more years than I'd like to count. And I think I'm up to 15 different companies that I've either started, bought, shut down, or sold, done something with in all different types of industries, everything from super high-tech stuff to manufacturing and anything and everything in between. And, along the way, I really developed an appreciation for having a system to run your business on. Think about it as an operating system. And what I found, because I didn't do that in the beginning, it was really kind of seat of the pants. And what I found was when I had a system to use, it was much better for me. We got more of the kind of results that I was trying to get, and actually it's a lot better for the team too, because I wasn't driving them absolutely insane. And so with that appreciation, later in my career, I really shifted from being an operator to being more of an advisor, and did a lot of peer group work where I started and led CEO peer groups, and began to help some of those folks implement a system in their business. And then as fate or luck would have it, I got introduced to a fellow named Gino Wickman. And Gino created a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And when I read about it first and then met him, I pretty much fell in love with what he had done, and just the simple, holistic approach. He and I became fast friends and had a lot of history in common. And so that led to me beginning to work with my clients to implement EOS as their operating system. And that sort of caught fire and really became my primary focus. And I began to move away from a lot of the peer group work I was doing, and really to just help people get this system implemented in their business. And then Gino and I collaborated on a book project called Rocket Fuel. And Rocket Fuel is really focused within an entrepreneurial company on the two really different types of leaders that we'd see. When we had those two types of leaders in combination, those businesses just were in a higher gear. They could go farther, go faster, do more, do better. And so that has been the focus of my work now for, another 6 years. I think that book's been out now.
Awesome. Well, you and I do a program, and our audience is definitely very familiar with me talking about Dan Sullivan, and he's going to be one of our guests coming up soon.
Awesome.
So I'm just real curious. I know you've probably been in some of the meetings lately where they're talking about simplifier and multiplier. I'm guessing the integrator is going to be more of a simplifier, and the visionary is going to be more of a multiplier. Would that be correct?
For sure. The visionary is typically, they're really focused outwardly. And they're seeing the future. They're looking down the road. They're anticipating where things are going and trying to figure out where the best place is to position this business to take advantage of where things are moving. They're generating, more ideas than could possibly be executed on, and some of them are pure lunacy, right? But some of them are absolute gold. And so, that's where the integrator comes in, is they can kind of plug into this visionary in a way that helps filter that. And so they can separate out the things that would, take us off in a completely different and maybe unnecessary direction. But here's something that's in the direction that we want to go, that, wow, that's great. And then they can take that and they can execute. They can make it real. They can make it happen. They can make it repeat. And I think Dan's language of the simplifier and the multiplier have a special relevance to our language of visionary and integrator.
And I'm assuming since you started asking those questions of yourself and started to see the issue of a way to have more systems, would you say you're an integrator, or you're the visionary, or
Yeah, so I am really a visionary, pretty extreme. So I'm very high on the visionary scale, and we actually have assessments that will help you assess that. So you take our assessment, and it'll give you a score for your visionary indicator and your integrator indicator. And so I'm about mid level on the integrator side. And what you see in entrepreneurs, you think about how folks start companies, and in the beginning, many times it's just them, right?
Especially in
And
real estate.
right. So you guys live it. You see it every day. And so when it's just you got to become a jack of all trades. You've got to figure out how to get it done when I can't hire somebody else to do it for me. And so you just kind of force your way through that. And as a result, you are in fact capable of doing many things, but they're not the things that you're greatest at. They're not the things that you love and just really enjoy. And, for a long time, I thought I was a great manager. And then what I found later is I began to work with people who were really great managers is, man, I wasn't that good after all. I think my span of control for management is about one, and it's an integrator. So, if you give me one integrator, I can manage them. And if they can manage everybody else, we could probably go pretty far. And so, I think that's the reality for really most of the visionaries that we see.
Mark, could you give a couple of, I know people, and I'd love for you to tell everybody how they can take that assessment if you know it, and we can link it in our show notes too. But just for somebody who hasn't read Rocket Fuel, what would be like 2 or 3 characteristics of an integrator? And then you kind of just did the visionary.
Yeah. So the integrator, well, first the assessment. So really for all this stuff, if you'll go to rocketfuelnow.com, that's a site that'll take you to pretty much everything Rocket Fuel. And so we've got some different resources, the assessments there, some different tools they can download and learn a little bit more about what this is all about. But the integrator side of the equation, so let's talk about that. So the integrator, again, is the one that's very executionally focused. Details are no problem for them. Follow through is no problem for them. They'll make sure that it happens. They'll get it done. They'll make it real. They're also really great at really holding people accountable and working through and between different types of folks to make sure that they're all aligned and pulling in the same direction when there's conflict, right? So let's say 2 of the leaders on the leadership team get crossways with each other. Sometimes, marketing wants to go this way and operations wants to go the other way. You guys have never seen that, but they can't agree, right? They try their best, but they just can't decide, on which way we should go. Well, we can't just sit there and be stuck. So the integrator is great at getting in the middle of that and really kind of hearing both sides and then understanding the context of the greater good, the shared vision that we're trying to make happen. And then they can make a call. They can make a decision to break that tie, get us unstuck and often moving again. And so those are all things that the integrator is just naturally wired to be really great at.
Gosh, I'm just sitting here thinking of all the questions that I wrote down to ask you, Linda. The one that I want to ask is not on my list. How the heck do you find a great integrator?
It's funny. So let me tell you. So the way that we wrote the book, first of all, we knew that some visionaries were going to want to read this book, so we had to make it really simple. So we made it, a simple, easy read, for somebody that's got the attention span of a gnat.
Yep.
And so that first chapter is all about the visionary. So the visionary reads that first chapter and they love it. It's all about them. They think it's fantastic, right? Well, give me some more me. And then they read the second chapter, and the second chapter is about the integrator. And they think, what, this makes a lot of sense. That could actually help me. And then they kind of look up from the book and they ask the question, this sounds great. How do I get one? And I got to tell you, in all honesty, that's when it becomes hard, right? That's when it becomes difficult. In the book, we lay out a 7-step connection process that we want a visionary to kind of work through to begin their search. And the first 4 steps of that process are all introspective things to get them to look at themselves and look at their business and make sure that they're really ready. And this is really a path that they want to step off on. And then once they do, then we've got some different avenues that they can tap into to kind of help make that happen. And those avenues range from something as simple as just putting the word out. I mean, you guys have great networks. And so if I say, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an integrator. Here's what that looks like for me. And we've got a tool on that website that's a starter job description of what that would do. And then just kind of put the word out in your network, and you'll be amazed at how many cases we see where that's how they end up finding somebody. You can post ads, you can do different things like that too, and that can help you look at more candidates. And then there's some people that they hire a recruiter. And we're seeing more and more recruiters that are niching down. They're specializing and they're becoming really integrator search firms, and they're just getting really good at finding these integrators, because I tell you, it's a little bit of a war over a scarce commodity. What we've found is there are actually 4 visionaries out there for every 1 integrator.
Oh, that was one of my questions. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So
more visionaries than there are
more
integrators.
visionaries than there are integrators, in terms of people that are naturally wired to do it. Right.
Wow.
And then to make it worse, that one integrator is not an ideal fit for all 4 of those visionaries. Okay. So it's less than 4. I don't know if it's 2 of them or 3 of them or 1 of them, but it's less than 4. So it compounds it. It makes it worse. So my message to visionaries is don't wait. You need to get out there and find your great integrator counterpart and begin the process of developing that relationship to help you do the things you're trying to do. And my message to integrators is, hey, realize that you're a highly valuable and very much needed skill in this entrepreneurial world, because visionaries are going to make a lot more happen if we can get you paired up with them. So we want you to recognize you're an integrator, do the things that you need to do to know what it looks like to be truly great as an integrator, and develop yourself and get out there and get working with one of these entrepreneurs and making stuff happen.
So I'm curious, Mark, I think I heard you say that on the integrator, they have a whole lot more follow through, correct, than the visionary.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, you and I are familiar with Colby because we both Dan Sullivan.
Right.
So would this be like what Dan qualifies as, like a project manager, like his Kathy, something like that, possibly?
Yeah, that's a version of it, right? And so when we think about Colby, what's an entrepreneur going to be high at?
Quick start.
Quick start's going to be way up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we probably don't need an integrator that's super high in quick start, because we need to kind of balance that out a little bit. They've got to be super high in follow through. So you picked up on that. Fact finder is interesting, because that's going to kind of be specific to the visionary, because they can't be so high fact finder that they drive the visionary crazy, right?
Right.
So there's a sort of a matching thing that happens here. We talk about it as 2 puzzle pieces. So we all have kind of a unique edge, a unique shape to the edge of our puzzle piece, and we're looking for the counterpart that has a complementary fit. So they're strong in the things that we're weak at, and they're maybe not as strong in the stuff that we're really strong at, but together we really got it all covered, and we really are a good, strong combination that covers all the stuff that a visionary integrator duo need to be able to cover. One of the other matching things there is really about drive or power. So, if a visionary is very assertive, they're very powerful, they're very forceful, the integrator has to be also to be able to match that power and stand up to them, so that they can have the conversations that they really need to have. And if they're too weak, that visionary is just going to bulldoze them and run right over them, and it's really not going to do anything.
That's so true. Yeah.
In chapter 7 of the book, it says, we sincerely believe the visionary integrator duo is one of the most powerful discoveries for taking a company to greatness. I love that, because I feel like it's so important. And then I look at through the lens of a small realtor who is not small, because some of our people run, 14 people teams. I mean, they're not necessarily small, but why do you think that's the case? And in any kind of, I don't know how much work you do with smaller entrepreneurs. I don't know what size companies, which I can't wait for you to talk about some of the programs that you have available, but I don't know, are they for mid-level companies, or you do small entrepreneurs also? What are you seeing?
Yeah. So our sweet spot is really for a business that's somewhere between 10 and 250 people.
Okay.
And if you think about what's happening, when a company gets to 10 people, the founder, the visionary, is starting to step out of that role of wearing all the hats. They've got doers, they've got workers that do different things, and they're really begin to put in place what we refer to as a leadership team, which is it's leaders to head these different functions and make things happen. And so that's really that's when the time is to make sure that you've got that integrator seat filled, and think about the integrator just like a function. Sales and marketing is a function. So some people are really good at that. Operations is a function. Some people are really good at that. Finance is a function. Some people are really good at that. So integrator is a function, right? Bringing all this stuff together, getting it focused, making it happen, and dealing with this visionary, being that interface is a function that's necessary as you make that transition from small, again, however you define it. We find that the number of people is actually a better predictor than the revenue. Just because it's about the complexity of the humans and the organization is beginning to grow. And so that's really the focus, is that's who we are working with most often, is folks that are on that curve.
Yeah. Gosh, I have so many questions. I love this stuff. It's so good. When you see a perfect visionary and integrator together, and they're like, okay, we found each other. We've got the perfect duo together. What are like one or two tips that you would give them to do right off of the bat? I know the book lists some, and I'm just trying to think like really granular on these.
Yeah. So there's a couple. Let me come at that from a tool perspective. So we have a tool called the Rocket Fuel Power Index. So it's interesting that you said, they're together and they're perfect. So I don't know that I've ever seen that. So there's not perfect. This is the raw, messy, clunky, entrepreneurial real world, right? And so there's always going to be kind of something, but definitely some of them are more powerful than others when they get together. So that's what we're looking for, is how do we maximize that power? And so this Rocket Fuel Power Index, it's got 8 questions, 8 different things that we're trying to dial them in on. And make sure that they're both seeing these things in the same way, and they've got them turned up as high as they possibly can. And when they've done that, then they're getting all that they can out of that combination. To get there and make it happen, we've got what we call the 5 rules. And the first rule is all about staying on the same page. And when I am working with a big group of integrators in particular, I'll have them fill out that tool, that Power Index, and I'll have them identify where they see that and where they think their visionary sees it. And then I'll ask them to tell me what area on their sheet has the highest gap, where they're seeing it one way and the visionary is maybe seeing it a different way, or just where they're really low. They're farther now from where they want to be. And almost every time there are 2 things that pop out consistently for, the vast majority of the room. One of them is this being on the same page thing. And, it sounds so simple. Just stay on the same page, talk it out, get on the same page. But people they forget about it. They get lax about the discipline of doing it. We've teach in the book a same page meeting discipline to really help them do that in a frequency they're supposed to do that with. And then what I find is so many issues, that's the root of it. If they just go back and do that, if they'll just go back and get together, get on the same page, they'll solve it. They'll prevent the issue. And what's painful to watch is when you've got a room full of the whole leadership team, and all of a sudden the visionary and the integrator are kind of going at it over something because they're not on the same page. And the whole leadership team's just kind of sitting back in their chair, just kind of waiting, watching, checking their watch, waiting for all this to go. And it's just painful. I feel bad for the leadership team. So that's a core thing. The second thing that pops out when I ask the question of where the biggest gap is it's about clarity of roles. And so they get confused about, oh, that's your thing. Oh, that's my thing, right? Who's going to take the lead? Who's going to make the decisions? Who's really going to own certain things? And when they don't get really clear on that, again, that creates more confusion and lack of clarity. And causes them to slow down and not get as much power out of the relationship as they could.
That makes a lot of sense.
One of the things it talks about is, you said for finding the integrator, you said you must be financially able to afford it. Is this a role where, let's say it's a smaller entrepreneur, because that's kind of what we deal with. Is this person, do you think, winds up being a salaried person? Do they wind up being a partner? What do you see mostly in smaller organizations, how they do this part?
So great question. And there's no one answer. So it really is all over the board. I've seen everything from something that's 100% variable comp to 100% salary. I've seen something where there is some kind of equity involved and some when there's none, and really anything and everything in between. And so I think it really is individual. In terms of, the visionary entrepreneur and whoever it is, and just kind of where they're at is what they work out. So what people need to know is that it's all fair game. anything is possible there. And it just really comes back to, what do you both feel good about? It needs to be something not transactional, but something relational, because this is going to be, a relationship that, hopefully you're going to have for a good while. Mm-hmm. And I have people that refer to their counterpart as their business spouse. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the level of relationship that they have with them. So, you don't want to get into a deal that somebody feels bad about, right? Because they're just going to have heartburn about that. It's going to keep coming back up. So it needs to be something that both parties feel really good about, and everything's available as a possibility.
So if the integrator was out on their own, I can understand why a visionary would need an integrator, because like Dana and I said, where do we find them today?
Yep.
But what are some of the pitfalls that an integrator goes into without a visionary attached?
Well, so here's, I'll give you a couple of different scenarios. So one is they don't know they're an integrator, and they're doing something else. So they're doing either a functional level that somewhere, not at the integrator level, but in a technical field. So they're on the operations team. They're a financial expert. There's something different, and they're doing that, and they just don't realize what they're capable of, that they're not currently engaged in right now. So that's one. An integrator is likely not going to go start their own business. But they might kind of wish they could. They might, they kind of have that itch. They like the entrepreneurial world, a little bit scary, but it's way more fun than kind of this big corporate thing over here. But they're probably less likely to actually pull the trigger, right? The visionary has that genetic thing, and it's that quick start a lot of times where they can't help themselves. They're going to go start the company, right? They can't resist that urge. And so that's one of the differences. So the integrator is probably not going to do that. So, but they may be sort of, sub-optimizing their gifts in other roles. The other thing that happens sometimes too is integrators are paired with bad visionaries. And it's really unfortunate, but you'll see some visionaries who just are, they sort of see their integrator as something less than them, and they kind of look down at them. And, in some cases, it's borderline abusive. And, my message to those integrators is that, hey, there's way too many visionaries out there that are really good visionaries that want and need somebody like you, hopefully they won't just sit there and take that forever. You got a choice, right? You can tolerate it, or you can make a change. And, as the demand for integrators keeps growing, I got a feeling that they're going to be less and less tolerant of those rough visionaries.
Well, one of the things I can think of in our industry that what would be deemed as a bad visionary is somebody who can't let go. They think they have to control everything, because in our business, you do everything for so long that a lot of what I see is they either micromanage the parts that they're not even that great at, or they just won't let go. What would you say? Or something?
Yeah, so that's great, Linda. So let's talk about that. So when we went into the book, I had sort of that same perception. And we're talking to all these different visionaries and integrators, doing research for the book. And what I learned and came to believe through the process of that was it's really not about letting go. It's about trust. So the visionary actually really desperately wants to let go. But what's happened is somewhere in their past, they have let go of something that's really important to them, something really valuable. And then somebody just kind of dropped it and broke it. And then the visionary is like, oh my gosh, that was my thing. That was my baby, my toy, my whatever. And you just broke it. Right. And so they kind of freak out about that. And so much of the early part of this relationship building is about getting that foundation of trust there, so that the visionary can trust enough to actually let these things go, because they want to. They really do want to. And so when I've got the right person there, I am confident they've got the capabilities. I am confident that we are on the same page. We're headed to the same place. We're on the same journey. Then all of a sudden I hand them something and they don't break it. They actually do good with it. Then I can hand them something else, and it just kind of grows and grows and snowballs from there. So it's about trust.
I feel like we're talking about my life, my everyday life on this episode.
Love it.
No kidding. On the integrator side, So can they be social or not social? That part doesn't really play a factor.
Yeah. So again, it's a matching thing. And so integrator typically more focused internally on the organization. So the visionaries out there, making strategic partnerships, dealing with the community, blah, 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 whatever. And the integrator is really focused on the internal team. But sometimes, some folks have really large teams. And so they've got to be able to interact and adapt and deal with all these different people. But the thing that's consistent about them is, they got no problem holding someone accountable. So the hard conversation, they don't shy away from it. They lean right into it and they have it. They keep expectations crystal clear consistently. So the organization, the people are never confused. There's never any doubt. They never see the leadership as waffling. They're communicating and setting crystal clear expectations, and then making sure that everybody is held consistently accountable for those crystal clear expectations.
You just said something that gave me the biggest aha. And Linda, we've talked about this before. In our industry, most real estate agents, when they're looking for this role, they and I've been very guilty of this too. They look for more of an assistant profile instead of an integrator profile. And I think that's where we're let down, because we're looking for the wrong profile, because a lot of times we'll hire somebody who there's no way that they could hold other people accountable, and they're not going to have the tough conversations, and they're probably not going to feel super comfortable communicating at that level, versus an integrator. Like everything you just said, that's usually what we need to be looking for instead of what we end up with.
Yeah, it's a really good way to say it. So they've got to be able to hold everyone in the organization accountable, and they've got to be able to match you and keep you from just bulldozing them.
Yeah.
Right? And so you think about it, it's a special skill set that's capable of doing that. And again, that's why it's 4-to-1.
Yeah. And for our audience, Dana, what comes to mind for me is the interview we had a while back with Dan and Jen. She's very much an integrator. And that's why they have such a successful real estate sales team, is because he has landed himself an integrator without even realizing he was getting one. Okay. So I have a question. When in the world did you get this idea of visionary integrator? How did you just one day realize, oh gosh, the good companies have these two people? Where did it come from?
Yeah. So Gino gets full credit for coining the term visionary and integrator, and kind of seeing that first, again, as he had created EOS and was working with clients to implement that system. There's a tool called the accountability chart that he made, where you lay out these different roles, and he just started to kind of notice it. And he had experienced it in one of his businesses. He started to talk to people about it, and there's sort of a series of events that led to that discovery. And so then when he and I began to talk about it, I looked back through my career, and I had these examples in my track record where those types of people had, again, sort of accidentally showed up, and it just worked so much better. And so, the work in rocket fuel is all around, putting the structure around that. Okay, so great. So if that worked so well, let's decode what makes it work, and how do you be intentional about it and really dial this in so you can be great at it and be a great combo.
Is Gino a visionary or integrator?
So he's one of those odd or rare folks he's really kind of both. And, we talk in the book about how it's really only 5% of the time that someone is highly, really highly developed at both. And almost all of them, if you really push them to go, all right, yeah, but, if you could just do one, which one would you do? They'll pick, right? And, but there's a handful of folks out there that, they're just really good at both, and sometimes they like to do both. So, my passionate plea to people, though, is even if you sit in both those seats, recognize there are two different seats on the accountability chart that have two very different functions that they fill, and make sure that you're holding yourself or being held accountable for performing each of those functions at the level that we need it performed in a given business. And a lot of times, even if somebody starts off at the place where they think they're both, and in my experience, almost always they move off of that in time, and then they realize, wow, here is somebody who can do this integrator stuff, and I can trust them enough to actually let go of this stuff. And then they get to kind of play in this visionary space that they never even imagined existed before. And then they, their special talents and gifts start to, reap a return for the organization, because they're actually exercising that muscle and doing those things that they never got to spend time on before.
Makes sense.
Yep.
You said something about earlier that you have an Integrator Academy. Talk to us about that. I mean, I know there's going to be a lot of agents out there that go, yeah, I want to know more. I want to understand this. I want to work deeper with this. Tell us a little bit about what that program is and how it might apply to our audience.
Yeah, sure. So, under the umbrella of rocket fuel, we think about the process. The rocket fuel formula is really to crystallize someone's understanding of, okay, this is what that visionary integrator thing is, to get them connected with their ideal complementary counterpart, whoever that might be, and then to maximize that relationship. So it's kind of those three steps. And as I mentioned earlier, from a visionary perspective, they come in and they hit that step that says, yeah, I want one, and then it gets difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've really made it part of our mission to go out there and identify and develop the greatest integrators on the planet. And so we've created what we call the Integrator Academy. Mm-hmm. And it's really for anybody who thinks they're an integrator, knows they're an integrator, anybody that you think could be an integrator, to go and become truly great as an integrator. So we have some video-based training that we take them through to help them master their craft, if you will. And we've got a whole series of things that we're beginning to offer, moving in the direction of, actually, we want to be able to certify integrators at different levels based on what they've been able to do. And again, as we draw more and more integrators into this community, then it becomes easier and easier for a visionary to come to us and go, hey, I want one, and I want them to be able to raise their hand and ask about 20 questions, and I want to be able to turn around and go, all right, here's 5 that look like they'd be a good fit for you. And so that's what we're working toward. And really the Integrator Academy is the beginning stages of that, the early phase. So anybody out there that is an integrator, thinks they might be an integrator, or knows somebody who is, please send them so that we can get them in there and help them learn the stuff they need to be really great and help more visionary entrepreneurs.
And if you're a visionary and you know that you want an integrator, they would also reach out too, right?
Sure. And we've got some resources that we can connect them with to kind of help them, some of them organic. So we have a private group where both visionaries and integrators are in there talking, and, a visionary will raise their hand and go, hey, I'm looking for an integrator. Integrators will raise their hand and go, hey, I'm looking for a visionary. And we've got a bunch of people that have gotten matched up that way. We've got recruiters that we can introduce you to, different resources. Again, just based on wherever you're at as a visionary, we want to have a solution to kind of help you take that next step.
And how would a business know that they're ready for that, to add that in? How would a visionary know that they're ready to add the integrator? Do you add them the first day you ever start, or as soon as you can find one? Or
right. Yeah. So you touched on part of it, briefly before we talk about as the 4 readiness factors. One of them is financial. So, are you ready to, take the financial step that's going to be required? And part of that is, understanding not only the cost. It's easy to see the cost usually, but understanding the magnitude of the benefit. So a lot of people, they'll have all these different issues that have been on their issue list for months or years. And one of the exercises that we'll take them through is, look, let's go through and let's put a dollar value on each one of those things. If you could solve that, how much would it really mean to you? How much would it be worth to you? And then you kind of add all that stuff up and go, all right, you know what? If you had a great integrator, all that stuff gets solved. And so it gives you kind of an other side, a value side to that financial equation to think about. So you got to be ready, from a financial perspective. Psychologically, you've got to be ready to make this change. From a lifestyle perspective, sometimes, depending on what phase of your curve in life, you may be more or less ready for something like this. And unique ability readiness we talk about as well, to use another Dan Sullivan term. Are you really ready to just operate in your unique ability? Or do you feel the need to keep playing outside of it and all these other things? So the more they're ready to that, the more and more of the right time it is. Interestingly, I see people that have brought in an integrator, built up their business, grown it, and then exited. And, they sold or they did whatever they did. And then they're kind of on to the next thing. And some of those people, interestingly, guess who their first hire is?
They either go back and take that integrator they have, or get a new one.
Yeah. Right. And so those people, they know something because they've lived it. And so sometimes that's the right move.
Yep. I had one last question. Is that okay?
Good. Well, we're about out of time, so I'll let you, Dana, ask your final question. And then Mark, I'd like for you to ask yourself, is there a question we should have asked you, but we didn't? So Dana, go ahead.
Okay. So my last question, Mark, I just did a little bit of research about you before the podcast so I could be prepared. And I saw that your mission statement was helping entrepreneurs get unstuck. to expand their freedom. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs who feel stuck sometimes. So my question is, what's one piece of advice you would give somebody if they're feeling stuck where they're at?
That's a great question.
Yeah. So the first thing is you got to recognize you're stuck, right? And so where that comes from for me is I was stuck, and as an entrepreneur in that long list of businesses that I got into, I had this vision of the dream where I'm going to be making tons of money, doing stuff I love, working with people that I really enjoy, and have all this freedom. That's what freedom looks like for me. And then I would wake up 18 months into the project and realize, man, I've never worked so hard. I'm not making anything. I hate these people, and this isn't fun at all, right? And so that's stuck. And so when you're stuck, that's the time to get really clear, right? So there's sort of a 3-step formula I've got to help get out of that. And the first step is you've got to get clear on where you really want to go and what you want to do in a way that then you can focus on the steps that you need to take. And another project I've got, I don't know if you saw it on my website or not, but the next book that I'm working on is called Exponential Freedom. And it lays out these 9 different domains. And there's a longer story here that goes back to a vacation my wife and I had in Colorado, and a long walk on a ski slope, talking about, would you rather be rich or would you rather be king? And it's an old question. And what I realized was it really wasn't about either one of those for me. It was about freedom. And what freedom looks like for me is different than what it looks like for Linda. It's different than what it looks like for Dana. It's different than what it looks like for my wife. And so step one is I've got to understand that. So I have to do the work to get really clear on, all right, here's what I want my life to look like in these different 9 domains. And then once I know that, I can assess how close I am to that in each one, and then where my gaps are, what I need to do to kind of move the needle in the way I want and get really unstuck and getting closer and closer so I can have more and more of that.
Ooh, when's that book coming out?
Well,
I may have more time to work on it now. We'll see.
Maybe out like next week, right?
Yeah,
Well, I don't know if you want it to launch right now.
Right.
Oh, I'm reading more books lately than ever. When they work with you, Mark, on this Unstuck, is that a one-on-one basis? Are you a coach to them, or are you working with them in a group?
So really everything I do falls under that. So, if you go to my main website, markcwinters.com, you can kind of see all the different things. The exponential freedom's there, the EOS stuff's there, the rocket fuel stuff's there. But when I'm working with somebody on an EOS implementation, I'm doing the same thing. So whether it's the rocket fuel stuff, it's all doing the same thing. It's all trying to get them unstuck and moving more in the direction they want to go. On the EOS side, I'm working with a leadership team. So, that's the visionary, the integrator, the direct reports of the integrator. That might be 3 people. It might be 9 people, right? It just kind of varies, but it's the leadership team of the company and helping them get really clear on where it is they want to go, how they're going to get there, so that everybody is on this 100% on the same page, side by side, top to bottom, all through the organization. Help them have systems so that they can, get traction, so that every day looks like they're getting a little bit closer to this place that they're trying to go. They feel that progress. That progress gives them confidence, and then be able to be healthy as a team, so that they can talk about the hard things that they need to be able to talk about. They're not afraid to bring things up. They bring them up, they put them on the table, they talk those things through, and you figure out how to use it to help them get closer to where they're trying to go. So as the leadership team can have more and more of those 3 things, again, the more progress they're going to make, the more impact they're going to be able to have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I don't know if this person was working with you or not, but I was recruiting a team a few weeks back, and they brought up that they were actually working with this EOS system. So if you have experience with working people in the real estate business, what have you learned has been beneficial? And tell the audience, what is that EOS system? Because I don't think we actually gave them a definition of what that is.
Yeah. So what I just talked you through in terms of clarity of vision and consistent traction towards making it real and building the team health, that's really what EOS is all about. The entrepreneurial operating system is a system to help you make those 3 things true in your organization. So at a high level, that's what it is. Gino wrote a book called Traction, and Traction lays it out very, very well. There's a handful of books in what we call the Traction Library that kind of build on different aspects of that. But in a real estate specific world, I've worked with folks, on the places I've interacted with real estate most often have been on the the construction side, and building stuff, the developers, investors, more so than, kind of the role that you guys play. But I've had lots of, I guess, kind of one-off discussions. And I think it really comes back to, we talk about the 5 tools, and the first tool that you got to get really clear on is this thing we call the accountability chart. Mm-hmm. And that's just getting clear on, all right, here's all the stuff that needs to happen. Here's a way to group it together so that one person can kind of handle this set of stuff and that set of stuff. And then here's how accountability for that is going to flow through the organization.
Got it.
Right. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people skip that step. They don't think that's worthwhile. I just have 2 people on my team, or I just have 3 people on my team. It's not that complex. Well, maybe not. Maybe it is. And by making that visible in a way you can kind of look at it and go, you know what? This stuff is working really well. Makes sense. This stuff over here is all jacked up. And it kind of highlights it. By making it visible, it makes it more apparent that here's something that you need to work on next.
Hmm. Makes sense. And I see clarity as a big issue a lot of times when realtors start trying to put teams together. Yeah. They really like the clarity. So I could see how that would be beneficial. Well, what's one question we should have asked you, but we didn't?
Boy, that's a tough question right there. I don't know. You did a pretty good job. You you hit all the high points in terms of stuff that I would have anticipated you'd ask about. I don't know. I don't know that I have one.
Awesome. You made it easy. That's such a great book. And I kind of educated myself by being on the website last night, and there's awesome. There's so much great stuff on there.
Awesome. Very cool. Appreciate that feedback.
Awesome. So great. You have his website. So be sure and reach out and see what tools Mark may have that can help you in your business. And remember, if you have a question or a challenge that you would like Dana and I to help you with, just submit it to info@everything life and real estate. And if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast and have Dana and I help you with a situation, or you got a great opportunity that might help other realtors, be sure and reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. And we'd love for you to give us a comments on our podcast, whatever tool you use for podcast. Be sure and give us a survey. We'd love a great review from you. And then best of all, if you enjoy what you get from the podcast, be sure and pass it on to a friend who may not be listening. So I just want to say, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. And Dana, I guess I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. See you then. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.